Hello and welcome back, Michael Olabode, our masculine feminine expert that has so many insights for all of our relationships. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you very much. It's always incredible to connect, to converse with you.
Happy days. So what we're going to talk about today, and I'm so excited about this topic, is the two main needs of the masculine nature. What are the two things that men need, or that the masculine energy in a relationship needs, that they will give them the fulfillment and the happiness and the juice in life to want to be in a relationship long term and want to be with the female. So let's go into that.
Okay. There's some primary needs. The first primary need is loyalty. And the second primary need, here's a really interesting one, satisfaction. It's really, really interesting. Which one shall we go for? Let's start with satisfaction, actually.
Okay.
Because it may traverse into a different path. So one of the important aspects or needs that the masculine is approaching the feminine for is to experience the satisfaction of the feminine nature. So what does that actually mean? Mm-hmm. We often hear that and we may have read it in certain books, that a man or a male feels like they want to in some way provide or give. But what does that actually mean? What does that do for him? When he performs an activity or a behavior or some part of his character creates satisfaction in the heart of the female, that gives him an experience.
Nice. It's like,
it's like, it kind of, right? It's very subtle. It may not have been defined in this way. You may have not necessarily come across it as explained in this way, but it's the satisfaction of the feminine nature is what he's looking for. So that feeling of, I was an instrument in the pleasure that you've experienced.
And making her happy. And it makes me happy to see the smile on your face.
Yeah. And the satisfaction in being able to receive my existence. And my existence and what I've done is actually created value in your life. And you've acknowledged and recognized that. See, it's not just creating value, acknowledge and recognize. Now, to the extent that the person's independent, to that extent he doesn't need external validation. Mm-hmm. So one can be so independent that they can just act in a loving way and serve people and not need a thank you. Here's an interesting question you can ask. When you do good for somebody, and you don't get a thank you, right? You give a card or whatever, you don't get a thank you, don't get external appreciation. How does it make you feel? What is the first thing that comes through your mind? Is it, oh my God, this person didn't really appreciate what I'm doing? Or, wow, I'm just so grateful, I'm happy that I was able to have an opportunity to serve this person.
I guess for me, it would depend on how many times in a row that happens. Like, I'm super happy to do nice things for someone, and repeatedly so. If over time, I feel like it's getting taken for granted, eventually I lose my motivation and I probably build up some sort of resentment, going like, okay, so I'm doing all the heavy lifting here. What are you contributing? And then eventually that will breed under the surface, while I'm still kind of hoping the other person will start showing up as well. And then eventually I might just pull away and just not do it anymore, or I might have a conversation. I rarely blow up, but I think that would, for many people, would be the other one.
It's a really important point. And is that in relationships or just in any type of friendships, would you say?
With friends, I tend to have less expectations somehow. Relationships, it's a bigger deal. Like with friends, obviously, if someone would never put in, I would probably eventually also start pulling back. But I don't have these high expectations in relationships. It's like, we are together right now in the moment. It's beautiful. I fully appreciate that. You go your way, I go my way. And we might not talk for weeks or months. As we come back together, it's amazing again. But in a relationship, I would have that expectation that the other person pulls their weight as well.
Okay, let me ask you a quick question for that. The expectations that you feel with friends, it seems like you have a higher tolerance level, right? Is it tolerance, or is it kind of like just there's less expectations? So it's like, in other words, would it take you a lot longer for that friend to not give or input, as you were saying, before you're like, maybe I need to question it?
Yeah, honestly, I don't think I've ever experienced that with friends, because I'm also not someone who will like do this massive input. I've never defined friendship by how much am I doing for them, how much are they doing for me. For me, it's just that connection I feel when I'm with that person, the depth of communication, the depth of trust, the depth of joint projects, etc. So for me, in a friendship, the what do I do for you, what do you do for me, has never really been part of the equation.
Why does it change for you more in a relationship?
Good question. No idea. But there it's more something like if I put in considerably and I don't know, I make your breakfast, I cook for you, I keep my house in a certain way, you are with me and you are here, I would have the expectation that someone, kind of pulls their weight as well.
Yeah, but why does that, do you know?
Because I think long term in the relationship, and it's like, I don't want to end up being the maid.
Okay.
No, and if the attitude isn't right in the start, then what's that setting us up for?
Got it, yeah. And it's really interesting how it's a different ball game when you take that, when you flip it from the friendship to the relationship, isn't it?
100%.
It's because what often happens, well, one of the reasons is the closeness of intimacy. There's a higher investment risk, right? There's a higher investment. There's a higher risk on your investment. So because now we're dealing with more intimate emotions and more vulnerability, and so if that's not been reciprocated, there's a lot more in terms of the expectations of that reciprocation. But also another thing that also happens is that sense of possession. The more you feel like I'm in a relationship with this person, the more that there's an increase in those expectations.
Oh yeah.
When there's less of the possession, which means when there's less of a connection of identity in being in a relationship, for example, you're dating or you're just seeing each other or whatever, there's less expectations. But as things get more and more serious, hold on a minute, I've done this, and this. What are you bringing to this connection? Because our hearts are very delicate. And so if we're going to make a huge investment with our time, relationships take time, relationships take money, relationships take energy, which is important, and attention.
And lifetime.
Exactly. So I need to ensure that there's a little bit of that mutuality that's happening. And so we basically find that one of the hidden and often unspoken things for the masculine nature is that sense in which he is able to be pleasing to the feminine nature.
So then it's really negative as well when I'm just not happy. Might be about him, might have nothing to do with him, but if I'm gloomy, and I've recently had that for a little while, where I've just been feeling gloomy, something wasn't right, part of it was the relationship, part of it wasn't. But in my gloominess, I could feel him pulling away and making even less of an effort, which then obviously is like kind of a death spiral.
Yeah, because that's
you can't get out of it.
Yes, exactly. Unless we do things like this, have great conversations, which are completely outside of that circle, outside of that triangle, outside of that connection, where we speak with friends and then add value to it. But Tirtha Swami mentions that one of the best things with relationships is your friendships, because when you speak with your friends, they give you new insights and perspectives that you can then bring into that relationship. And so having a strong friendship network is actually super, super beneficial for a relationship. So yeah, you're right. It's when you're in that mood or zone where the happiness and that satisfaction has not been experienced, it seems like you're not doing anything, right? You're not doing a behavior, but that itself, you're not adding to, you're not doing something that's causing an extra behavior, but simply that the psychological disposition that you're having is having an effect on the inspiration for the masculine to serve and input his energy in it. It's interesting. This is what I'm doing, by the way, as we're discussing, we're kind of breaking the science down very slowly, sequentially, and in stages, because it happens really fast. Because how we explain it is, a male who's not necessarily thoughtful will go, "Oh, you're always complaining. Oh, you're always criticizing. Oh, I can't do anything right." You know, like that. "Oh, but I did this for you. Why can't you recognize that? Oh, you never thanked me for that. Why are you so impolite?" You know what I'm saying? So it's just so fast and responsive and reactive and ignited and volcanic that obviously for a majority, unless you're completely enlightened, for a majority of humans, they're going to react and go, of course they're going to be defensive. So we're just breaking down the science. It's because to some extent, he feels like his existence or his behavior or his extra input trying to serve you is not being acknowledged, reciprocated,
respected. Yeah. I've recently read about, and we've discussed this before, male feeling respected is almost more important than male feeling loved. And when the male doesn't feel respected, it will give less love, whereby then the female not feeling loved is likely to give less respect. And so again, there's this death spiral, and the antidote to that basically is give respect unconditionally, just as you wish to feel loved unconditionally. Finding it really hard to apply though.
What would you say is why is it difficult for you to apply?
Because it seems that often when I am trying to problem solve and I'm bringing up, hey, there's something we need to talk about, the male feels disrespected, when I mean no disrespect whatsoever. I don't mean to criticize. I'm definitely not naggy, bitchy, angry. I'm just trying to bring a topic so that it can be looked at and solved, so I can put it out of the clutter of my mind and actually emotionally be fully present in the relationship. But then the male feels criticized and pulls away and becomes defensive. So then I don't feel heard. And even if we're kind of coming to a conclusion in the conversation, usually the negative feeling lingers. And then, as you know, with the feminine, if a negative feeling lingers, everything gets tinged by it. It's like you have one red sock that colors your whole whitewashing, and suddenly everything is pink. And then he says, oh, but we did all these great things. We had so much fun. And I would say, well, but I still felt shit the whole time. Yeah, but you're always just seeing the negative. And like, no, it just wasn't resolved for me. Every relationship ever? How do we solve this, Michael?
It's a big question, and it requires a big answer.
Go for it.
It's really, and you're right, it's just like, and it's this kind of never-ending loop, hey, that it's like this kind of infinite loop of, and the key thing with that is that it creates a lot of resentment, a lot of bitterness and anger, which you can't solve in any situation. You know, it becomes something unsolvable. So the way that we try to move through that is, first of all, understanding the mechanics and the science behind it all.
Yes.
So respect, what does that actually mean? One of the terms that is, one of the ways that respect is defined, basically means acknowledgement. To acknowledge means that you're paying attention. And it also means that you know what's been done for you. A beautiful Sanskrit phrase for gratitude is called kritagya. Kritagya means to know what's been done for you.
Yeah.
So the masculine nature has this dying need to feel like they've been acknowledged for what they've done for you.
Coming back to the satisfaction, right?
It comes back to the satisfaction, because if they weren't trying to, because generally speaking, they don't the masculine nature doesn't tend to need to be validated for their identity. They often need to be validated for the effect that they've had on you. Does that make sense? It's slightly different. So they can wear a nice outfit. It doesn't matter if someone rates the outfit or not. They don't need to be validated for their identity. However, let's say they go out and they do something. Let's say they're coming home from work. They're a few minutes late, but what they've done is brought you a gift. So that means if you're able to acknowledge, hold on, you went this route, you've got me a gift from that store. That means you spent your time, money, energy, and your attention diverting yourself to that way to get that gift from me and then come back to mine. So I'm trying to acknowledge the whole process as much as possible. I'm trying to acknowledge the whole process of that. So that's the satisfaction that they appreciate. Often, the masculine doesn't tend to need the feminine to do a whole heap. Sometimes we get into a feeling that the more I do in a relationship, the more lovable I am, or the more I deserve love. But it's
That's
not
such a feminine thing.
It's not. They're not massively looking for someone to do loads and loads and loads and be some superwoman. Not so much. They're looking more for satisfaction.
Yeah.
Being that ability to receive and acknowledge what's been done for them.
How he feels in my presence based on how I feel about him and how he is being appreciated.
Yes.
Interesting. So answer to me this, how do I, when something is being done for me, which is absolutely lovely, but it's probably not what I needed in the moment.
Yeah.
How do I give that feedback? Because obviously I can always just say, yes, thank you, you're amazing. But obviously then I'm encouraging him to do the same thing over and over again, which is probably not really what I needed. So how can I express my needs so that he can actually do for me what really helps? Does that make sense?
Yeah. The Eliza Vitti, who's a women's health expert, also talks about cycles that males go through. The feminine nature tends to go through cycles that can last anywhere between the kind of 27 to 30 or 32 days, but the masculine nature tends to go through cycles through on a 24-hour scale. So you'll find in connection with people will find in connection with their partners that there's certain times of the day, there's certain periods, there's certain things that they've accomplished that allows them to be a little bit more open to feedback. Generally speaking, it would not be recommended that you tinge their expression with showing, actually, I would have liked this, and this in that moment. It tends to be something that you may want to bring up later in a more relaxed environment, and in an environment where he doesn't feel cornered. You may be going for a little walk, or just a little bit before having fun together, where he can, because the way his mind works is he tends to compartmentalize things. So
I know, it's so odd for women. It's like, how can you do that?
Like, what? It's in different boxes. This is what I wanted to bring up earlier, because we forgot to share that. Is that for the guy, he tends to put things in certain boxes and compartmentalize. So he'll group, okay, here's my woman. She's not feeling happy. I'm feeling really happy about my hobby. I just achieved this. Oh, I've got another report to do. Everything's all in different boxes. It's in different connections. For the feminine nature, it's all connected. So if they feel upset about their relationship, they also feel upset while they're washing the dishes, or let's say while they're going out, or while they're going to work, or while they're driving, or as you mentioned, right? And so he's thinking, hey, we just dealt with a conflict here. Why are you still upset? No, it's all connected. There's just a one reality. It's all connected. So it's important that the masculine nature understands that, because otherwise they'll start taking offense to that dissatisfaction occurs, and then they start taking offense, not realizing, no, she's not. It's because of this one thing that's connected with it's her emotions are connected. So if it's not dealt with, it's going to affect everything. It's going to play out and affect everything else she does.
Can't run and hide from it.
Yeah, but the male's not like that. They can disconnect the emotions with the logic.
Yeah.
So they can feel bad about something, but it doesn't affect how logical they are at doing their job or work or hobbies and activities as well. Yeah. So how do we actually move through this? It's important. It's really about the foundations of the relationship you have. So one of the things that's really important is, how many relationship credits do you have in your account? And how many relationship credits are you going to withdraw from that account when you deliver this feedback? For example, let's say he doesn't really care. Like for me, I'll just give an example. I don't really care too much. I'm not really attached too much to a particular style of dress. So if I have feedback received from someone that says, hey, I really like the light clothes or go for more of this style, I'm like, cool. It doesn't withdraw much from the relationship credits. But one of the things that I find important is, let's say that I find important that I'm able to have a positive effect on somebody's life. So if someone gives me feedback that I didn't have a positive effect on their life, then that's going to withdraw more from the relationship credits if it's obviously not necessarily presented in a way. So how many relationship credits have I built up with this person that they can withdraw from it and still have it in positive?
That is really good image.
What we do, we're neutral.
Yeah.
Or we're in overdraft and we're still pulling funds out of the account. Yeah. And so no wonder why you get a negative response, even if you're perfectly, I mean, you can have the perfect pitch, right? The perfectly pitched feedback, the perfectly sandwiched, beautifully made up, presented conflict, feedback that you have. But because the relationship credits aren't being built, you're still withdrawing from the negative. So I would focus less on what can I say and more on how can I build relationship points in other areas so that when I do share this feedback, even if it's not done in the best way I could, I was a bit stressed at the time or whatever, this person is 100% guaranteed knows I still really love and appreciate them. And so, and a final point in that point is we don't have confidence that the person loves us. We don't have confidence, you see? So we need to help build confidence in a person that, yeah, I'm here for you, I love you. And that's through small acts of service, sometimes big acts. And so when you do share some negative feedback or feedback in that way, growth feedback, it's just another form of love for them. It's not an attack. So I'd focus more on building love in areas where you can. And so in areas where it's like, yeah, what you've done for me, I appreciate it. It doesn't work for me. Yeah, you can bring that up because you've got so many relationship credits.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the male side of things. I think we might leave it at that today, just to understand those needs for the masculine, and we'll look at a separate video for the core needs of the feminine, if that makes sense.
Sounds good.
Thank you so much for sharing. Specific advice before we move on. What is your specific advice, to-dos for women that we can put into practice to make our men feel more appreciated, more loved, and kind of draw them in more and strengthen the relationship?
You know what? Sometimes you could just ask. It depends how, like, I'm a little bit more kind of upfront and straightforward. So sometimes you can just ask, oh, what did you do for us today? Because sometimes what happens is we sometimes don't give space to allow the masculine to explain what they've actually done to try to serve you. We don't give them that.
You might often not even recognize that. That's true.
Yeah, we don't give them the space to actually listen to what they've done so that they can go into a little bit of details of, like, for example, let's say they helped you with something or they made you something. Sometimes we just say, thank you, I really appreciate it. But you could also just inspire through questions them to go into some detail of how they went about that sacrifice. And it feels really nice, right? It's like, just like if I ask you, how did you, if I ask, if you tell me you were a director of an incredible spiritual venture, and I say, wow, that's incredible. But even more powerful than that is, wow, what sacrifices did you make in your life to get to the position? What struggles did you have to go through?
Ask questions that allow the other person to shine and to share their inspiration.
Yes.
Yeah, nice. Very nice.
Really, really important.
Okay, cool. So that is meeting that need of seeing the satisfaction. What was the other one again?
Loyalty.
So we need to speak about loyalty still. We haven't even touched on loyalty yet.
Yeah, loyalty is very interesting. And again, it's not just necessarily mutually exclusive, but it's again one of those unspoken, undiscussed needs. Loyalty is important for the masculine nature because if he feels that there could be some lack of loyalty, and this doesn't necessarily mean an affair, but if he feels there's lack of loyalty, what happens is it drains the inspiration for them to try their best in a relationship. Yeah, so if they feel like at some moment this person can replace me for someone else, it drains the inspiration to give their best in a relationship.
It would probably also be like ridiculing them in front of friends, making a joke at their expense.
Yeah, that's all part of it.
I'll play the devil's advocate here. It's basically like hurting their ego, though, isn't it?
Was it warranted? Was it necessary?
I don't have a specific example in mind.
Yeah, but the question is that. So that's the question you have to ask. In other words, if hurting their ego, if it was necessary, okay. If it was not necessary, why take that option?
That's right.
So then in his mind, he's thinking, why did you have to say that at that point when we're going to drive home in 20 minutes and you could have just mentioned it there? Why is it a point? So, but again, he'll compartmentalize. So you may not necessarily hear the emotional expression behind it. But over time, what happens is it starts to dissolve the fire and the tenacity and the ignition that he needs and needs to fuel in order to give into the connection. And loyalty is also not just physical, but it's also social. It's also intellectual. It's also emotional. So, for example, if there's a danger that the specific intimate needs that he wants to provide for her, if there's a danger that she can outsource that, and receive those needs, the fulfillment of those needs from someone else, that can put him on edge.
Okay, so we're not talking about cheating necessarily, but also like having these really deep connection conversations, like sharing my most intimate thoughts with my best friends rather than him, stuff like that.
Yes, but it will generally be if there's a couple of kind of factors also. Is that person who you're sharing with that if it's another male, is it a potential threat? Is there a potential option of her developing a connection that outweighs or perhaps eclipses the connection that we're in? So it's not just sharing it intimately. It's also, is there potential that this person can find their satisfaction from someone else? Remember, we're going back to that whole point of satisfaction. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not just necessarily a physical misloyalty. It's, I wish to be the instrument of this woman's satisfaction. If someone else is the instrument of the woman's satisfaction, that means that there's no need for me.
Yeah.
If there's a need for me, then there's no need to respect me. And if there's no need to respect me, then...
Yeah. The other thing being also, if I can't satisfy her, I might be more inclined to find someone else who I know I can satisfy. I think that might be at a lot of the underlying roots of cheating, right?
Yes.
Like there's all these negative patterns, all the disappointments, etc., piled up in relationships if they aren't solved properly. And if then there is someone who potentially a bit younger, looks up to him, thinks he's amazing, tells him how great he is, takes a real deep interest in his work, for example, then obviously it's so much easier to jump ships and be able to give all that they want to give and see the satisfaction in their eyes rather than going back home to the wife.
Yes, exactly. And so that can open up for affairs, for scandals, for cheating, because again, we're looking back to that satisfaction.
So satisfaction comes over loyalty then?
Satisfaction is kind of basically like the primary, and then loyalty is it's almost like the secondary, but you can't, they'll go hand in hand. In other words, you can satisfy, but if the loyalty is not there, then he'll kind of feel and detect that and not give so much. If there's loyalty there, but there's not that satisfaction, he'll try. But if there's not the satisfaction, he himself, it affects his self-worth, because he would then feel ineffective. If I'm a boxer and I punch my opponent and it has zero effect, it's like the most devastating feeling, because I have no impact, right? It's just, he just looked at it and said, oh, was that your best? So if I've tried my best and it's still not good enough for who I'm connected with in a feminine nature, I'll apply my best to someone else, and then that leads to scandals, affairs, etc.
Which, when it comes down to, actually does make sense as well. It's like, if your best fully satisfies me and I'm more inclined to give to you, then we have a really good shot at something. If at some point whatever you are giving really doesn't give me what I need, then it might be also time to be real about that. If, you know, there's not other responsibilities like having kids together, etc., ideally. But like, to just sit down and be real about it. Is what you have to give something that truly, truly matters to me, and vice versa? And if not, are we probably better off being really good friends, or than being a couple, right? I mean, much as it hurts, especially when it happens 2 years, 5 years, 10 years down the track in a relationship, in a way, that's actually for the better. Can what you have to give fully satisfy me?
Exactly, 100%. And we have to move away from this mentality of short-term gain, because it creates long-term pain.
Yeah.
We want to look for the long term. Now, let me ask you a question, because we're going to flip into an interesting point. What are some of the ways people basically can give love? Like ones with gifts?
Yeah, love languages, basically. I mean, we've talked about this before. I've made videos about this before. For some people, it's physical affection. For some people, it's giving gifts, like you're just saying. For some people, is doing acts of service. For some people, it's like verbal acknowledgement, telling people, etc. So there's like lots of different avenues.
Yes. Now, one of the things that occur in one of the ancient texts around relationships, it says that the effort required to give love and show affection, by the way, you need the effort also to receive love. In other words, for the feminine nature to be satisfied, she actually has to put the effort in to be satisfied. It's not an automatic thing. It's interesting, isn't it? So in other words, when we say, hey, the guy doesn't try enough, or you can try a bit harder in relationship, he communicate with me. Believe it or not, we also have to put effort in to be satisfied. And the ancient practice of that is called santosha. Santosha is in the Yoga Sutras, and it means to be satisfied, to have complete satisfaction. So contentment. So it's actually a practice for the feminine nature to be satisfied, just as much as it is the practice for the masculine nature to try to satisfy. And so in the Vedic literature, it mentions how what we are looking for is, let's say you're satisfied with, I'm just going to use units. Let's say you're satisfied with 1,000 units and he gives 1,100 units. Okay, there's satisfaction. Now, let's say for whatever reason, he's a bit ill or just can't step up to it, and he drops to, I don't know, 1,001 units. It still works because you're satisfied with 1,000 anyway. Now, the problem though is that if it drops to 900, it doesn't matter how low or below that line is, he'll experience that and you'll experience that. And so unless you're able to have a situation where what's being given can also match what is the requirements in terms of receiving, it won't work. So for the masculine nature, what they're trying to do is trying to act in a way that helps to satisfy the feminine nature. And the feminine nature is trying to act in a way to be satisfied with the attempts that the masculine nature is making.
Yeah, and appreciate that they are trying, even though sometimes it might not work out. Fair enough.
Yeah, and trying to, and yeah, you're right. And trying to sometimes just, appreciating and just like trying to find the good in it. Like, and think about it. Like, how do you be satisfied? It's just trying to act in a way that, hey, I'm accepting of what's being received in my life at this moment, and I'm not trying to desire more. So in a sense, it's like trying to
appreciation, isn't it?
Yeah. And you see that the opposite of that is greediness.
Right? So and again, it comes back to in the early phases in dating, and this is like different topic altogether, to really gauge, is what this person has to give meeting my needs? Is what we both have compatible enough that it's going to work in the long run. Let's not get into that topic, but this is really where that relates back. It's like, be honest with yourself and don't just go for the physical attraction and the fun and the lovey-dovey pink feelings, only to then be incredibly disappointed 6 months in, a year in, when the person can't deliver what you were expecting, because it's not fair if those expectations never were made clear and there wasn't clear communication about how this is going to work.
100%. I remember hearing about one air hostess who would earn about, something like £75,000. So that would be, just over 100,000 Aussie dollars. And one of the points that she mentioned is she knows that she cannot be with a person who's an air host who earns less than her. And people will look at her for, oh, she's superficial, oh, she's materialistic. No, I think two things. One, she's probably had an experience of trying to compromise her needs in an area, and it's like, no, it just doesn't work.
Yeah.
But she knows, I love this, because she's aware in that area of what it takes for her to be able to respect the masculine.
And that's respect. I was just going to say it. It's respect. And when you can't, as a woman, fully respect your man, it's not working.
It's gone. It's gone. Absolutely. Because what defines the line? What's a good friend in a relationship? You say, where's the line?
That's right.
So when you can't cross it if the feminine nature doesn't have that full respect for the masculine, it shouldn't cross. If it does cross, it causes issues, and then it causes issues with self-esteem, because the woman's thinking, oh my God, I've got so many high expectations. Maybe I'm unlovable. Maybe I'm too greedy. Maybe I'm just too selfish. And the masculine is thinking, oh my God, I can't satisfy her, or she was complaining, what's wrong with me, like that. And then it just creates a big mess.
As women, we emasculate, but it's really just trying to be true to who we are. And that can be emasculate. And again, in the end of the day, it's then right if those relationships part ways, because there is truly a mismatch and it doesn't work.
Anyway,
let's complete the session here, just for timing purposes, and not the video. It's going to get so incredibly long. It's been so insightful. Like, I for myself have taken out a whole bunch of nuggets from this, and I love this. Can't wait to make the next video about the two main needs of the feminine nature. And I guess our onlookers are going to enjoy that very much as well, because it's so insightful. So if you loved this video, as always, you can follow our channel and get more insights from Michael, from myself, and from our other guests. And if you hit the bell button, you'll get notified when we are putting together new content. So enjoy the session. Down in the comment section, you're going to find a couple of links, both to Michael's website, to my website, and to other ways of staying in touch with these beautiful teachings. And thank you, Michael. We're going to see you again soon.
Definitely. Thanks a lot. Take care.
Bye.